I'd like to welcome you to the virtual open house for the Utah Division of Water Resources Plan. Before we get started, I'd like to request that everyone who's joined the Google Meet, please mute your microphone and turn off your video so we can preserve bandwidth and make sure everyone has a good experience. I'd also like to tell you what this meeting is and what it is not up front. This meeting is an opportunity for you to learn about the plan and for you to ask questions about it. And I will explain exactly how to ask questions after the presentation, which will follow my introductory remarks. This meeting is not a means for you to submit formal comments to us on the plan. In order to do that, you need to go to our web page, which will be displayed at the bottom of the screen, and use the public comment form that's available on that web page. Okay, so the purpose of the meeting today is to let you know about the Water Resources Plan and answer your questions. And our agenda today will be to have a brief presentation, or a presentation by our division director, Candace Hassenjaeger, for about 15-20 minutes. And that will be followed by a question and answer period, hopefully for the remainder of the balance of time that we have together. And with that, with no further ado, I'll turn the time over to Candace for her presentation.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Todd. And let me just take a minute to get the presentation up. Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here this evening. Can you ask Paul for notes? Thanks. Sorry. Thank you. So very grateful for all of you spending your time with us this evening. You know, I just got to recognize that this has been a wild year and, well, maybe a wild couple of last years, you know, with record, with a worldwide pandemic, wild weather events, and with the extreme drought that we're in and the dry conditions. You know, and then we had Great Salt Lake and Lake Powell hit record low elevations when we hit July, when about 100% of our state was in extreme and exceptional drought. You know, and I am just really glad that you are all here and that we're here with you today. And I'm gonna go ahead and probably move on. There is one quote I love by Woodrow Wilson that is, I use all the brains that I have and all that I can borrow. So we thank you for your attendance tonight, sharing your evening and your big brains with us. And so the division's mission is to plan, conserve, develop, and protect Utah's water resources. We have a team of about 45 people, and I'm very grateful for their dedication and passion that they bring to their work to fulfill this mission. You know, the purpose of this plan is to look 50 years into the future and provide a comprehensive look of Utah's water resources, a summary of the challenges and actions the Division of Water Resources can do to address them. This is not a drought response plan. It has been years in the making, and I really am grateful for all the work that's gone into it. This plan has three kind of focus areas, or, you know, three water management principles, including reliable data. We recognize that reliable data is needed to make informed management decisions. Supply security. Securing a reliable water supply requires a comprehensive approach. And then a healthy environment. Preserving the health of watersheds and the environment is an essential component to water management. I'm really grateful for the Statewide Water Advisory Committee, who spent a lot of time and effort attending a variety of meetings, reviewing documents, providing comments and feedback to improve this plan. They're all listed here, and thank them for all of their time and effort. One of the things that makes this plan different is this is, really supposed to help guide us and provide actions and goals. There's about 18 of them. I'm not going to go through and read each of them for you. We have limited time tonight, but I want to highlight, some of them are conservation focused, like working to expand water saving rebates to the public, increasing the installation of secondary water meters. And then there are some that are more data-driven, where we're looking at, and analyzing the stream gauge network and, developing consistent and documented ways of accounting for depletion. And then there are some that are more stakeholder-driven, whether it's within our state agencies or our Great Salt Lake stakeholders as well. So let's start off with the reliable data kind of area. And we know that reliable data is needed to make informed water management decisions. And one of the things that I often ask myself, because I've spent a lot of the last 14 years working and planning, is why do we plan? And really, the big elephant in the room is that we have a growing population. The census once again declared Utah as the fastest growing state in the nation, and we're expected to double by 2065. And, it's not just strangers in a far-off view. These are our family members, and this is part of my family, and I'm invested into planning and working toward a sustainable water supply for them into the future. So over the last 5 years, there's been a tremendous amount of effort put in to improve data in the collection process, developing regional water conservation goals, and developing a new scenario demand model. So when we look at the municipal and industrial water use data, Utah is one of the most comprehensive water accounting methods in the U.S. There is no national standard for water use accounting. Utah accounts for all water use types, including potable, secondary, and recycled water by all sectors: residential, commercial, institutional, and industrial. And we don't apply any credits for flows returned to the system. This comprehensive process may give the false impression that Utahns use more water than other people. We've done some internal analysis of looking at residential use across a variety of different states and found that we're very comparable to other states. We've updated our data collection and review process with the Division of Water Rights in collecting the M&I water data. Water systems submit their water use data to the Division of Water Rights, and they reach out to us for feedback. We evaluate the data, flag potential errors, and send that back to Water Rights. And then Water Rights gets back to the water system to make sure that the data is corrected. And so we have some of the best and most accurate data that we've ever had. So when we look at the last, from 2015 to 2019, this process has been applied, and we've seen the gallons per capita per day of the total public systems go down from 239 to 221 in 2019. We are currently working on the 2020 data, and we'll publish that as soon as it's ready, likely toward the end of the year or the beginning of next year. The water budget is a tool that Water Resources has developed and refined over decades. This tool looks at the ins and the outs of all the water in each of the sub-areas. And there's about 152 sub-areas, so there's a lot of number crunching that goes on here. So rather than follow the money, we follow the water and look to where it goes. So this is a definitely more comprehensive schematic of the water budget that includes all the inputs. And I'm not going to go through and read them all. They're in the document. But then it goes through this process in the water budget model and the simulation that calculates all of the different outputs, including diversions, depletions, whether that's for agriculture or M&I, reservoir storage, evaporation, those type of things. So let's dig into some of that data. So if we look at the water use diverted by sector and look at the last about 30 years, there's about 79% of the water that's diverted for agriculture, where 21% is diverted for municipal industrial uses. And if we look at the last 5 years, we find that 75% of the water has been diverted for agriculture and 25% for municipal industrial. This is a really interesting graph that shows the statewide and how the regions vary in their water use and their water use diversions. So if we look at the Jordan River, which represents Salt Lake County, we can see that the bulk of their water goes to municipal industrial uses. Not all their diversions, most of their diversions. And then a small sliver goes to agricultural diversions. And then you can also see Weber River Basin and the Utah Lake Basin are having growing pieces of their water pie being diverted for municipal and industrial uses. And then if we go to some of the more rural parts of the state, including like Uinta and Bear, we can see that there's the biggest chunk of the pie is going to agricultural diversions. The water budget also produces this data in depletion form that you can look at in the report. And so one of the most exciting things, now it's all exciting, is our scenario water demand model. And you can obviously tell I'm a geeky engineer because this is what gets me excited. But we spent a lot of time trying to develop a model that looks into the future and tries to figure out all the different things that impact water use. So in this example, the persons per household is one. Evapotranspiration, the amount of water a plant needs. Lot size, how does that impact our water demand? Green space, our housing type. Is our housing types changing from single family homes to multifamily homes? That impacts our water use. It's the commercial, industrial, and institutional, sprinkler efficiency, as well as climate change. So we developed 3 different scenarios for this plan. One is the no change scenario. So that means we all know what we look like and feel like today. And if we have our water use patterns that are today projected out into the future with our growing population, what does that water demand look like? And then if we look at our baseline model that looks at all the expected growth that the Kempsey-Gardner Policy Institute is projecting, and then what are our current development trends? We recognize that we're getting smaller lot sizes, smaller family sizes. We're looking at, different housing types, that we're seeing more housing come in as townhomes and apartments rather than all the more traditional single-family homes. And so what does that impact? And what are the impacts of climate change in that baseline model? And then we look at one additional scenario, and these are just 3. We could run hundreds of different scenarios depending on what it is. We chose these 3 to represent what our potential futures could look like. And the last one is if we meet our regional water conservation goals, which I'll cover here in a moment. With all of the expected population growth, and if we meet those conservation goals and climate change. There are some significant water supply challenges into the future, including climate change, as that brings more uncertainty to our current water supplies, drought, as we've just experienced with executive orders and drought declarations, and wildfire impacts to our watersheds. This is something I love to talk about, and there's been such a great effort that went into this, is our open water data site. Over the last 5 years, we've tried to increase our transparency and make our water data more available to everyone. And this is a great platform to go download data, explore data, and there's a lot of great offerings there, whether it's water-related land use, municipal and industrial water data, and water budget data that we talked about. So go to water.utah.gov/open data. And then let's get into supply security. Securing a reliable water supply for the future requires a comprehensive approach that includes water conservation, water development, conversion of agricultural water to municipal and industrial water uses, and then we also need other innovative water management strategies such as water reuse, aquifer storage and recovery, and water banking. Pretty much we have to do everything to meet our future population and water demands. In 2019, we put in a significant effort to do a regional water conservation goals. These goals vary across the state depending on climate and the regions and what are the potentials for water savings that are in those areas. And they range from 11% up to 20% throughout the state. In July, with the drought, the governor thought it recognized the importance of fast-tracking water conservation and really looked at these 4 categories. One is how we grow, so integrating land use and water planning really is critical, and it sets how we grow matters, and it sets our water use patterns for decades to come. And then the other 3, 2 of them which are more retrofitting, so looking at how can we, flip our strips and change our landscaping to be more water wise, so through that expanded turf buyback program. And we're working with the governor's office and the legislature to implement that. And then also looking to statewide installation of secondary water meters. And then finally, agricultural optimization, recognizing that investment in agricultural optimization will create flexibility and benefits for farmers and improve water quantity and quality. So now let's pull all those pieces together and really look at the supply and the demand. So in this chart, this is a supply and demand chart for the state of Utah. On the bottom, you can see the years out to 2070, and then on the y-axis, you can see the volume of water needed. And so in this chart, the dark blue represents the 2015 reliable water supply, and then you can see the 3 scenarios that we talked about. The no change system demand scenario, so that's if we grow as projected by the Kimsey-Gardner Policy Institute, and with our current water use patterns. And then the baseline scenario is if with the same population growth, but with our current our current changes in our lot sizes and those type of things, those housing trends. And then what if we meet our regional water conservation goals that we're working toward, is the green line on the bottom. So one of the other things that we did to try to estimate was the agricultural water use conversion. I don't know about you, but in my hometown, even just across the street, there was an alfalfa field that is now being turned into a residential community, a subdivision. And so at that point, that water that was attached to that land is now being moved from an agricultural use to a municipal use. And so what does that conversion look like? And that's what this effort was to try to do, was to get the agricultural land that's projected to convert, estimate the water converted from the ag to M&I use, and then have a range of what that could possibly be. So if we look at that first chart, and once again, this is the statewide chart that has that reliable supply in the dark blue from 2015, and then the 2 lighter blue agricultural to M&I conversions. In addition, there's a dashed light white line that estimates the potential diminishing reliable supply due to climate change. One thing that's important to note about when you're looking at the statewide chart is that it's a great example for the state and a quick overview, but it doesn't represent the regional differences. In this case, we know that we can't share water from Logan, to St. George. And so it's really important for us to dive a little bit more into the regional areas. And so here we did that for you, but this is the same chart set up, but this is looking specifically at the Wasatch metro area, which covers pretty much the Wasatch front and the Wasatch back. So you can see those 3 system demands, those 3 scenarios, the estimated agriculture to convert, the diminishing reliable supply due to climate change. And we can see, depending on the impacts of, climate change, we might be okay out to 2055, 2060. It really just depends on what our water use patterns look like, and then what are the impacts to climate change. And if we dig a little deeper, or a little farther south, I should say, to the Kanab and Virgin River Basin, so this is really Washington and Kane counties, we can see those three scenarios, as well as there's not a ton of ag to convert to municipal and industrial uses, so we can see they need the water much sooner, depending on the level of conservation, 2025 to 2030. This report also covers a lot of local and state water projects that I don't have time to get into the details, but includes Central Utah Project, the Central Iron County Water Supply, Lake Powell Pipeline, Bear River Development, Aquifer Storage and Recovery, and water reuse. And there are also additional topics that are in this plan that include agricultural water optimization, water law, interstate stream and compact issues, and water banking. And so there are a lot of information that I won't be able to cover, but hope you have time to look through it in the report. Let's talk about the healthy environment real quick. Watershed management aims to maintain a healthy balance as things change, such as climate, forest health, urban developments. There are several agencies and organizations dedicated to healthy watersheds, and collaboration has never been more important. Water resources are essential for ecosystems, wildlife, water quality, humans, and the economies to thrive. You can see that there's a long list when you're looking at watershed planning and management on things to consider. It stopped progressing. Thank you. So there is, we are working toward the Watershed Council, which that act was passed in the 2020 legislative session. And really this is to develop diverse and balanced stakeholder forums for discussion of water policy and resource issues at the watershed and state levels. We currently have a consultant that we have hired to help us facilitate getting the State Watershed Council up and going. And then in the first year, we're working to get 2 of the basin watershed councils going, and then work toward the others as well. So that'll be an exciting forum for people to engage in. Great Salt Lake and its associated wetlands are critical ecosystems for migratory birds and a variety of other wildlife species. 5 out of the 11 watersheds in Utah flow to Great Salt Lake. If less water flows to the Great Salt Lake, there can be serious impacts to the natural system, wildlife, and human health. And Utah faces the challenge of balancing the water needs for a growing Wasatch Front population and maintaining a healthy Great Salt Lake. There has been a ton of research, and there's not enough pages in the plan or even in this presentation to go through all the different research that has been done on Great Salt Lake, whether it's through the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, the Great Salt Lake Institute. There's just been a lot of efforts to research and study this lake. I did want to bring up one in particular, which was part of House Current Resolution 10, which was a concurrent resolution on Great Salt Lake. This stakeholder effort that brought a variety of stakeholders together and kind of come up with a ton of things that they could do, that we can do as a state to help Great Salt Lake. Some of those buckets include educate and engage, improve information and decision making, optimize agricultural water use, and optimize M&I water use, and that includes that integration of land use and water planning, refine legal and policy options, and sustain the efforts over time. So as conclusions, it's the improvements in each of these focus areas are necessary for our state's population to continue to grow, especially at the rapid rate it's going. And we are working toward those actions that are listed in the plan. And I love this quote by Socrates, the secret to change is to focus all of our energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So thank you for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back over to Todd Stonley for the question and answer period.
Thank you very much, Candace. So I believe I failed to introduce the staff that we have here with us, but this is a good opportunity to do that as we move into the question and answer period. My name is Todd Stoneley, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Division of Water Resources, and behind me there are many experts with the Division of Water Resources and one from the Division of Water Rights who will help answer questions today. So as promised, I wanted to tell you how you can pose your questions for this meeting. So those who are participating in the Google Meet, in the lower right-hand corner of the Google Meeting window, you can click on the triangle, square, and circle icon, and then click on Q&A. And then at the bottom of the window that appears on the right, click on the plus Ask a Question button, and then you'll be able to type in a question. Questions will generally be answered in the order they are received this evening. And if we do not have time to answer all of the questions tonight, we will do our best to post answers to all the questions on our webpage within a few days after this meeting. So you can check the FAQ, or Frequently Asked Questions, tab on the plan webpage to view these questions when they are posted. Okay, so with that, we'll give you a little bit of time here to post some questions. We have a question that we commonly receive that I will ask Joel Williams to answer. And the question is, Colorado River Compact and the Upper Colorado River Compact guarantee water to the upper basin only after commitments to lower basin are met. Each upper basin state is allocated a percentage of the residual. Is this the understanding of the Division of Water Resources? If so, what are the Division of Water Resources projections for Colorado River flows? Joel.
Thank you, Todd. The Colorado River, as we know, is a shared resource among the 7 states and the country of Mexico. And the understanding is, as the river is divided up, that water is shared. And the interesting thing is, we talk about the compact and the law of the river, but starting in 1922 with the compact, the law of the river has been modified and has grown to include several agreements and documents. And over this 100-year period, the states have continued to work together and determine what does this mean, and working together to figure out how to make this resource serve the needs of all the states and Mexico. So going forward, looking at, for example, a year like this year with reduced flows and low elevations in both Lake Powell and Lake Mead, it's requiring increased collaboration, additional meetings and discussions to determine how to move forward. So it is a challenge, but one that the states are committed to work together on to find a successful solution.
Thank you, Joel. Okay, we have a next question that's come up, and this one will be for Candace Hassenjager. I'll read that. The plan and Governor Cox both recommend expansion of the Flip Your Strip program statewide. Who is responsible for the success or failure of Flip Your Strip? Will municipalities be held accountable for the success or failure of this program in their jurisdictions? Candace.
Thank you for that question. I think there is a lot of efforts as part of the Flip Your Strip program that is currently ongoing through the Utah Water Savers to make sure that, the Flip Your Strip program is a success. There are requirements for certain amounts of vegetation to be put back in, and there are checks to make sure that it's put in correctly.
Okay, we have next question. and I will do my best to answer this question. Can the division make its research regarding water use among states public? USGS's research finds that Utah uses more water than most of the nation, at times falling behind Idaho, which does not align with what the division has stated. So we have done some research on this, and there is other research ongoing in conjunction with some of the large water districts in the state and a consultant that they have hired. And we will make that research available when it's completed. But we also have some of this, our past work that we've done available on our website, I believe. But we can certainly make a link to that report available if it's not on our website at the present moment. Good question. All right, the next question is Great Salt Lake, and I think we'll have Candace Hassenjaeger answer this question as well. Hello, you referenced HCR 10, a resolution that has no funding support or binding action, but you didn't say how you plan to maintain Great Salt Lake levels and ensure water continues to flow into the Great Salt Lake. Sorry, I can't see the bottom part of that question, the last part of the question. All right, AV people can scroll down a little bit, I'll be able to see that. Thank you. So what is the Department of Natural Resources going to do for the Great Salt Lake? Candace.
Hello again. Thank you for your question. Great Salt Lake, yes, it is. The HCR 10, as you mentioned, has no funding, support, or binding action. And there is a tremendous effort by a variety of stakeholders that are working to address how to get more water to Great Salt Lake. There is not one silver bullet to solve the issue, and there are a lot of efforts ongoing. There's currently water banking that or contracts that are looking at changing water, and we are in discussions with the legislature on potential additional resources to get more actual funding to go to that. They also funded a Great Salt Lake Water Coordinator right now that is helping to spearhead those efforts.
Okay, thank you, Candace. All right, the next question is another one that I believe I can answer. You had some data on statewide per capita residential water use. Do you have this information broken down by regions or counties? Is this data publicly available? This data is available, and it's on the open water data site that Candace mentioned in her presentation. I can't remember the exact link, but you can go to our website and find that through the water data tab, I believe. Thank you for that question. Okay, another question about water use and comparing with other states. If Utah's water measuring system gives us the unfair reputation of being water wasters, but you aren't able to do an internal analysis to compare our use numbers to other states, why not change our system so comparisons are easier and or at least share the results and methods of the internal analysis? So this is a question we receive quite often. What Utah does with our water use numbers is very comprehensive and is more detailed and breaks down water use in categories that other states and other regions don't do. So we're proud of that water, the way we analyze water use in the state, and it makes it hard in some cases to compare apples to apples with other states. So that is one reason why we're doing a study of that in conjunction with the large districts. And again, that will be shared with the public as soon as that study is completed. But we think we do a good job looking at water use in the state, and if other states did it the same way we did, that we would look fairly comparable. But the data will verify that in these studies that we're doing, so stay tuned for that. Okay, another Great Salt Lake and a Bear River development question. I think I'll ask Marisa Egbert to answer this one. How can the division reconcile their priorities of finding ways to get more water into the Great Salt Lake while still actively pursuing Bear River development through acquiring right of ways?
This is a great question, and it can be confusing because it seems like we're going about two different things separately. But as part of the mission of the division is to plan, conserve, protect, and develop Utah's resources. It takes multifaceted tools. It takes all the tools in the toolbox. Some of the tools don't always need to be used. Sometimes I've got a mallet. I don't use it a whole lot, but the other day I needed it. There's different tools. Some are used more often. Some are not as, are things that you've got there in the toolbox, but you're still not using. What's going on right now is while we're aware of the Great Salt Lake and collaborating and working particularly with other sister agencies regarding Great Salt Lake, the data is showing, and we've worked with, there's 4 water conservancy districts who will eventually supply the water to users. It's important to know that we're working with them actively to keep track of the projections. And again, the projections go based on water population growth, how much use we're using, and a lot of things that Candace discussed in her presentation. It's moving targets so often, especially when you're looking out decades. There was even changes in population growth, and there was the discussion of how it slowed down when we had the recession about 10 years ago, but now it's picking back up again. So it's a moving target. That being said, we are still seeing that need. In 1991, we expected the beginning of the initial need for water through Bear River development for 2015, which was 6 years ago. And over the years, that's changed. When I started working on this 15 years ago, we were thinking 2030, 2035. We are now looking at 2050 or beyond. So 35 years pushed out because of so many of the efforts that's being done in secondary metering and water conservation and some other smaller projects. That being said, a project this size takes upwards of 2 decades of environmental impacts and going through the NEPA process, of designing, and then of actually constructing before you have a first drop of water. With that in mind, knowing that there is a large diameter pipeline that needs up to 100 feet of right-of-way to construct and maintain, we are trying to maintain a strip, particularly right now through Box Elder County, through some very tight areas where development's already happening. Our desire is to maintain a corridor ahead of time so that in the future, when it comes to the point where, we need this pipeline, we need the corridor, we're not taking out houses, we're not taking out community and disrupting communities. We're working actively now to try to preserve that to help reduce the impacts and reduce the costs in the future.
Thank you, Marisa. So the next question is in Chapter 8 under Water Law and the responsibility of the state engineer, I'm not seeing any mention about consideration of the public welfare in making water decisions. Why not? I'm going to invite Eric Jones to come up and answer this question, but before I do that, I'll just reiterate that this plan kind of focuses on what the Division of Water Resources can do as far as actions, goals, and recommendations. So we don't delve into the responsibilities of the state engineer or the Division of Water Rights. But Eric's here today, and he can address this question and hopefully give some insight on that. Eric.
Thank you. So in the plan, it's a brief summary of what water right law is for the state of Utah. It can't include everything. It's a very robust law system that we have that governs water rights in this state. But Chapter 73 of Utah Code delves into a lot more detail. And in there, one of the criteria for application approval is public welfare. So every decision that the state engineer makes does consider the public welfare. And I know I have 3 minutes to answer a question, but that's the answer to the question.
Thank you, Eric. Brevity is not a bad quality. All right, the next question. This is another Bear River development question, and I'll ask Marisa Egbert to answer this. Is there any peer-reviewed research that shows Bear River development will only lower the Great Salt Lake by 8.5 inches? Marisa.
That's a great question, and I might be also tag teaming with Candace on this. A white paper was done several years ago. We worked with several entities, stakeholders, Utah State University, Westminster, and worked on this. And what we're seeing at full development of Bear River development, 220,000 acre feet, there's going to be return flow. It will return in different locations necessarily than where it's going at this time. But looking at current use, current flows, and kind of talking about you flush the toilet and it goes back into the system, looking at that, we're seeing less than 100% of what's called depletion, actually less than, 100,000 acre feet of depletion from the system. So that a lot of that is going back to the lake, albeit in different locations. And with that, the modeling that we've done has shown that it could be as much as 14 inches, could be lower. It all depends on the level at the lake at the time, of course, but this average of 8.5 inches. And so that is in the white paper. It is on our website. And the other thing, and it's mentioned in the 2019 Bear River Development Feasibility Study, there were two other, and I don't know right this moment the exact years, there were two other studies that have been done, and they're mentioned in the report, where, and I believe one is through one of the Great Salt Lake management plans through Forestry Fire State Lands, that it discusses a depletion of 100,000 acre feet off of Great Salt Lake would reduce the lake by about 12 inches, by a foot. And so that's in a couple of different documents. So when we came and did our work to the 8.5 inches, we saw that that was comparable. Candace, I don't know if you have something else to add.
I think you did wonderful. I would just add that since, as Marisa mentioned, we are pretty far out in this process, that this will have to go through a complete EIS and NEPA process. So there will be a significant amount of additional modeling that will take place to determine the impacts of on Great Salt Lake.
Okay, we have another question here. In Chapter 9 on watersheds, the graphic 9-2 regarding impaired water bodies, Great Salt Lake is depicted as having no evidence of impairment. I'm not sure it should be included in this context, as it's a saline lake that has narrative standards and not your typical water quality standards. Maybe not noted. So I'm not seeing that as an actual question. However, we will, since this deals with water quality standards, we will consult with the Division of Water Quality and try to get an answer or address this issue in our responses on our website. So, next question. I'm a Washington County resident, and if my interpretation of your graph is correct, that even in your third best case scenario, our county will not have a substantial amount of water in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is a good question for Joel Williams to answer, and relating to Lake Bell Pipeline and why we feel that project is necessary to meet the needs, even in the best case. Joel.
Thank you. The graph that's shown in the report uses the data from 2015 as far as the available supply, and we know that since then we've seen some changes of additional projects coming on to bring in local projects to develop some additional water within the Kanab Virgin River Basin. Also, the graph does not take into account conservation advances that we've seen and plan to continue to see that will help extend that supply somewhat further. So we do anticipate having additional supply. Let's see, we're in 2021, probably, I think 10 years could be reasonable. Looking beyond that, I think, is when it really starts to show a need for additional water. So I think the best answer there is that graph doesn't necessarily represent the things that have changed within the last seven years.
Thank you, Joel. So this next one looks like a comment, not necessarily a question, but I will read it. Since the scope of waters covered in the plan include a variety of sovereign lands, perhaps we should include mention of the public trust resources that they are. And that's a good comment. I'd encourage you to submit that on our public comment page, and we'll consider including that in the report. I can mention that there are several water bodies that are considered sovereign lands of the lake bed of Utah Lake, Great Salt Lake, Bear Lake, and other water bodies. So that's part of what that's talking about, the public trust doctrine associated with those lands. And we will reach out to the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to help get a good answer for that question or address that issue. Next question, what data are you using for your climate change modeling? Okay, this is a good question that I can help answer. There are several studies out there. One is the Bureau of Reclamation study on the Colorado River, which estimates that the flow of the river will decline about 9% over the next 50, 60 years. There's a study that the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District had conducted that looks at the vulnerability of their supplies to climate change, and they estimated roughly a 9% average decline in their water supply into the future, 50 years out. And we also have an internal study, or a study that one of our employees has conducted in conjunction with a professor at the University of Utah on climate change. And they looked at several studies of different river basins around the West, and around 9-10% decline was projected in those areas. So we felt pretty comfortable showing or predicting that about 10% decline in our water supplies would be roughly where the various studies that we've seen, how that would impact our water supply. We also looked on the demand side, how increasing temperatures and variance in precipitation might impact water demand, in particular on residential landscapes. So we incorporate that, and we estimate that's about a 10% increase in evapotranspiration that would occur. So we've included climate change impacts on the supply as well as the demand side of the equation there. And there are references in the report to those studies that I mentioned, or we can get those references to you. Next question. With all the new construction happening statewide, what is being done to eliminate the installation of grass and high water use plants? A lot of local zoning ordinances require the use of sod. Are there plans in the works to change this? And I think Candace would like to answer this question. She's getting out of her seat, so I'll let you do that, Candace.
Yes, thank you for that question. There has been quite a tremendous effort this last, I would even say, year to integrate land use and water planning together. The Division of Water Resources was appropriated $270,000 in this last legislative session to help do just that. We were also able to leverage $30,000 from the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council for the phase 1 of this project. And so on our website, you can look at the integrating land use and water planning page, and you can find the initial documents that came out of that phase 1. So that includes a Utah-specific framework, a self-assessment, a stakeholder checklist. So this is really trying to get communities together. Phase 2 is actually working to bring those communities together, so to have workshops, and we're working on getting the consultant hired to do those workshops and to bring in those different systems. And I would also say that there are additional efforts through the Utah League of Cities and Towns, Prep 60, to integrate land use and water planning even more, because we definitely recognize how we grow matters, to your point.
Thank you, Candace. So we're getting to about 10 minutes left in the meeting, and we'll continue to answer questions for about 5 or 6 more minutes. Then we will have some concluding remarks and direct you to what to do from here to further participate in this public review process of the plan. So this is another question that I'll have Marisa Egbert answer. When will the NEPA, which stands for National Environmental Protection Act process for Bear River development begin? Marisa.
Thank you. With my answers and 6 minutes left, it could only be 2 more questions. If Eric Jones comes up, we can do 6 more questions. Do you want to answer this? No, I'm sorry. Again, this is a great question. 10, 15 years ago, we thought the NEPA process was around the corner. But again, because of all the great efforts of the water districts, these 4 water districts, pushing out the need for Bear River development, it pushes out the NEPA process and the beginning of the NEPA process. We've had some very high-level discussions with Army Corps of Engineers, thinking that they would be the leading agency at at some point in the future. But one thing that we are seeing, and again, you can look in the 2019 feasibility study for Bear River development, or also just the executive summary, which is a lot less pages and easier to find. It talks about that process. So if you go to water.utah.gov, go to projects and go down to Bear River development, there's these reports that you can click on. But we're seeing, if we go backwards, let's say the need is 2050, and we start thinking, okay, we got about 5 years of construction and several years prior to that with design and then anywhere from 7 to 10 years is what we're expecting on the NEPA process, the environmental impact statement. That adds up to somewhere around 20 years. So that's 9 years out at this point. That being said, it continues to move out, which we're so happy for that to be. The 2019 report alone indicated 2045 to 2050. We are already hearing from the water districts that they are now looking at 2050 and beyond because of some of the great work that they're doing. But we're expecting that it's going to be somewhere about a 20-year process before we can even get the first drop of water.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. The next question is one that I can address. Utah seems like it's not actually charging water users the true cost of providing water. I've seen among some reports that Utah has some of the lowest costs to users in the entire United States or U.S. West. Can we increase the cost to literally shock heavy users in reducing usage, especially in watering green lawns? So the cost of water in Utah is a great subject, and we've written a report on that topic that delves into some of the reasons why Utah's water costs are lower than elsewhere. Some of the reasons include much of the population is located at the base of mountain ranges that have nice, clean, pristine water and groundwater springs that come right down and are gravity fed into those systems. So the cheap cost of Utah's water is partially because of that. It doesn't cost much to pump. We don't have to pump it up into storage tanks and into reservoirs where it can flow back into our system and pressurize our system. It's naturally pressurized through gravity. And the the fact that we don't have to treat a lot of our water extensively to make it meet certain standards also makes water cheaper in Utah than in other places. Anyway, that report online on our website has more information about some of those reasons, and that's a really good question. Okay, I think this will be our last question for the night. Why is rainwater collection limited to 2,500 gallons of storage in Utah? Some surrounding arid states offer fewer storage restrictions. Isn't slow landscape discharge more beneficial to water basin systems than high-volume, short-duration storm events, e.g. summer monsoon rains? And I will have Eric Jones come up and answer this question since, because that restriction is part of the water rights regulations on rainwater collection. Eric.
Okay, so the below ground storage limit of 2,500 gallons. What's the actual reason behind that number? I'm not 100% sure. I believe that it seemed like that was a feasible storage tank that someone could bury below ground on their own property. The main issue with rainwater collection is that all water that falls in the state has already been claimed by some appropriator. So the rainwater that would fall on a roof would go into the gutter system, would go into the sewer system, then into a canal or to a river, which someone is reliant upon for their already approved use. So that's probably why they want to limit to a lower amount, as 2,500 gallons, is to ensure that somebody's water right is not being impaired by rainwater harvesting that is occurring upstream from their historic diversion. That being said, we've had projects that have stored larger amounts of rainwater. It's just a matter of finding a willing party that owns a water right that you could utilize to store a larger amount of 2,500 gallons. So there is limitations on a residential lot, but I think we're willing to work with people if they want to do a large-scale rainwater harvesting project. And we could help them out. It's just a matter of, again, finding a willing participant with an existing water right.
Okay, thank you, Eric. So this concludes our question answer session. We have received additional questions that we don't have time to answer this evening, and we will do our best to answer those questions as well as answers from our experts to our webpage, as I've mentioned previously. So as we conclude this evening, I want to thank all of you who have participated, and we had some good, lively questions and discussion and answers about those questions. And we had a great presentation by Candace Hassenjaeger on our plan, and we're excited that so many people are interested in what we are doing and our efforts to plan for Utah's water security and future. So I want to review with you as we conclude this evening how you can continue to contribute or participate in the public review of this plan. So as mentioned previously, at the website that has been at the bottom of your screen throughout much of this session, you can go and find a copy of the draft if you haven't yet looked at it. You can read it, download it in big chunks all at once or little pieces. And the appendices are all available there on our website. And there's a tab called Plan and Appendices. You just click on that, and it will take you to all of those documents that you can review. There will be, we will post the recording of this virtual open house online as well under the virtual open house tab. So you can come and return to this and review it again if you'd like, or you can share that link with others who may not have been able to attend today. And as I mentioned previously, the questions and answers that we've provided today will be included, and also answers to the questions that we haven't been able to address will be posted there as soon as we can do that. And those will be posted under the FAQ, or the Frequently Asked Questions tab, and encourage you to go and review those answers and share that with others as well. Finally, if you would like to officially submit comments to us on the plan, there is a public comment tab available on that website or webpage. You can click on that and you can use that form to submit official public comments to us for our consideration. And I'll make a note of that those will be published as an appendix in the plan when we are completed with the report and it is finalized. Again, thank you so much for attending this evening. We have appreciated your good questions and would like to conclude and adjourn this meeting now. Thank you so much.